Sunday, and then you do the locals. All good for you guys. So, James, for you to stay.
Roy, good afternoon.
Afternoon.
Good to see you. 2 more games left this season, and potentially, depending what you're going to do, 2 more games left in football management. How are you feeling with the season come to an end?
Well, I think it's always a strange feeling when a season comes to an end. I mean, whatever the circumstances, but there's no doubt this one feels worse in some respects, partly because the team's relegated and that's not a nice feeling to have to live with, but also knowing that probably this retirement will definitely be the serious retirement, and I won't get tempted back again after this stint here at Watford, so I've got to come to terms with that as well. Now I think it's only right that I should come to terms with it. It's been a fantastic innings that I've had really in an incredibly long career, and it's been a very pleasurable career as well. I've enjoyed every minute of it, so it is the right moment. But having said that, I'm out on the grass there today doing a little bit of coaching with a small group of players, and unfortunately I still do realise that I actually quite like that side of the job, but I'll have to wean myself off it.
So you can't be tempted back in?
No, I wouldn't think so. I mean, dangerous to say never, isn't it? Because I am still relatively fit and apart from my current problem, relatively healthy as well. So I don't think I'm retiring because I literally just couldn't do it. It's not that sort of situation. But at the same time, next time I will give myself a stern talking to and tell myself, even if you think you're capable, it's not the right thing to do. So, and my CV won't be floating around various clubs, that's for certain.
What's been the key to your longevity in the game? Because it is, yes, as you said, an incredible innings that you've had. What's been the key to it, do you think?
Well, there's obviously a massive element of good fortune, that jobs have constantly turned up for me, and often, they've turned up without me doing a lot of searching or having an agent searching for me. I think one of the keys was the start that I got by spending such a long time in Scandinavia. That was a different world, especially in the 1970s and 1980s. I think those 12 years out of 15 or 14 that I spent in my initial 14 years were very important. A, as a grounding, B, as a life education as well, a coaching education, and also, of course, it meant that things weren't particularly cutthroat in those days. They weren't even as cutthroat in England in those days as they are now, but certainly it was a much calmer environment and a much more secure environment. So that's definitely played a part. And since then, I suppose I've just been fortunate in the sense that the jobs that have come my way have been relatively successful, and I've been able to move when the time's come to move to another job, and I've always wanted to do that because I've always felt that I had the enthusiasm and energy required to take the job on.
It certainly sounds like it every time we hear you speak as well. Now, I want to talk about Rob Edwards coming in. I know you spoke briefly about it after the Everton game, but I just wanted to ask you, what do you think he can bring that maybe managers previously that have arrived here at Watford haven't been able to potentially do?
Oh, I couldn't answer that question. I mean, I think that would be a question you'd have to put to the people at the top of the club, because they obviously have appointed him, and maybe they're thinking that with this appointment things are going to change drastically from what we've seen with the previous managers. And there's been a lot of us, and there's been quite a few who've come here with quite good reputations and quite good CVs. What Rob is obviously going to bring is his youth and his enthusiasm for taking on a job at a higher division, because at the moment his work has been in the lower divisions, which he's done very well. And of course I think he'll be taking over a club where the players, should be showing that they are far too good for the Championship, and he'll be taking over a team where he might be looking at a lot more victories than defeats, which of course hasn't often been the case when the team's been in the Premiership.
Do you think it's helped that the decision's been made now and helped you to kind of add a bit of extra motivation to the players coming to the end of the season, that they've got something to prove to the new manager coming in for next season?
Not necessarily, because we don't even know which players are going to be here next season. So I think that would only be a relevant question if we knew that all the players who are currently here and who've not succeeded this year will actually be wearing the club's colours next year. I would think for those that haven't played as often, or young ones who are maybe coming back from loan, they must be looking at it a completely blank sheet, if you like, where there's no black marks against their name, and every opportunity to impress the new coach. So I can understand that. But it was really up to the club. The club has known all along, just as I've known all along, that my stint here would end on the 22nd of May, so they've had lots and lots of time in that period to decide on the new coach, and on this occasion they've obviously made their decision earlier rather than later.
Moving on to Leicester, going up against a player in particular that you know quite well, Jamie Vardy. What was he like to coach? Excellent.
Jamie Vardy is a guy that he really is what you see. It's enthusiasm, it's work rate, it's desire, talent, of course. You don't play for England without talent. But I found him really, really good to work with. I think he was unfortunate, of course, a lot of the times that we played, his major strength, which is, running behind people and stretching defences. We often played against packed defences where there was no space to run behind. But he did very well, I thought, for England. He scored a vital goal for us against Wales, which helped us to at least move to the next stage. And I found him a joy to work with. I'm always pleased to see him because he's got that smile on his face. And it's a credit to him, really, that, well, perhaps a little bit like I was saying earlier, his start, I suppose, meant that he came into the actual cauldron that little bit later. And he's come in with that incredible enthusiasm and dynamism that he obviously brought with him right from the start. And it's meant he's had a lengthy career. I see he's been injured a bit more this year. I don't know the details of that. He could quite happily have stayed injured for this game as far as I'm concerned, but I fear he's decided to get himself fit for it.
He's obviously scored 2 against Norwich in the week as well. He's probably showing that he doesn't get distracted too easily with stuff in his personal life. His wife's going through a very high profile court case right now. Was he somebody that you felt like he could block out everything externally when he's on the field?
I don't know. I don't know how you can honestly say that you can be convinced that a player can block out anything going on his life externally easily. But there's no doubt about it. He is a football man through and through, and football is so very, very important to him that if anybody is capable, perhaps of making certain that things that are happening outside in their lives don't play a big part on the important aspect of football, he will be one who could do it. But I honestly couldn't say, and I don't follow those sort of cases. I'm afraid that's another world to the world in which I have chosen to live.
It's another world to quite a lot of us as well, Roy. Final one from me. I know you said before the Everton game you had 9 injuries. What's the latest on injury front? I know you've got a big set of notes for the team who's ahead of Leicester. Well,
if you count Shaq Ford, who was on the bench, he's a young boy, it's 9. And if Pedro doesn't recover, it's 10. Which is ridiculous, really, to be fair. What's ridiculous about it is that it was only 3 weeks ago, you guys who were at all the press conferences, I remember saying and actually congratulating our medical staff and saying what a fantastic job, that here we are 2 or 3 weeks from the end of the season and they're giving me a list of 27, 28 players, all of whom are fit and ready and wanting to play. And all of a sudden now we're wondering how we're going to put a competitive team on the field. But on that subject, all credit, I thought, to the players who did go on the field against Everton, and I thought they were more than competitive. I thought they did an outstanding job, so that gives me big heart, if you like, going into tomorrow's game, because I've seen those boys go out there and do a very good job for the club against Everton, and I'd be fully prepared to back them to go out and do it again. Hassan Kamara comes back, of course. That's one advantage for us. He's back from suspension. My pleasure, thanks.
Hi, Roy. Good
Hi, afternoon.
I was wondering, the most recent game against Everton, how important was not necessarily the result or the clean sheet, but mainly from the players' confidence and aspect, and also that connection with the fans?
Yeah, the fans were very good. I thought they've been pretty good throughout, I must say. It's not easy to keep coming and supporting a losing team, and especially those 3 games we had where we were really hoping we could perhaps get points against teams around us and pull away from the... we lost each one of those games narrowly, having teased our public into thinking we're going to do this, and at the last minute we don't. So they've been good throughout in that respect, and I thought the really pleasing thing the other night was the team unity, the team spirit, and the fact that everybody quite literally was doing their level best to do what we've sort of been asking them to do ever since Ray Lewington and I came to the club. The way they played the other night, that's what we've been preaching from the very first day, and we've seen it as well with the other players. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying suddenly we see it for the first time, but in a game really where the team was entitled to say our backs are against the wall today, and you're asking a lot of us because we haven't played a lot of football, and now all of us are playing together, and a lot of your so-called bigger name players are not there to help us out. I thought they did their jobs really, really well, and it was as good a team performance as I think Watford have given in my spell at the club.
I was wondering, despite the relegation, what did you enjoy the most here at Watford since joining back in January?
I enjoy the work with the players, I enjoy the coaching, of course, I enjoy being on the field. I suppose, the things I've always enjoyed right the way through my career. Nothing really has changed from the beginning. I'm sure someone watching me coach today would see differences to 1976, but I think they'd also see a lot of similarity in the way I work and the things I do, because I haven't sort of thrown anything out, if you like, along the way, and all that's happened is, of course, I've aged, but I don't even know that has diminished to a great extent the way I try to coach, and the enthusiasm and the passion, at least, I try to bring to the coaching sessions.
In terms of Leicester this weekend, are you surprised with the amount of goal they've been conceding from set pieces, and is that an area you're hoping potentially to take advantage this week?
Set pieces are simple. They're stats that people love to see, but if you want to score goals from set pieces, the first thing you've got to have is someone who's an exceptional deliverer of the ball. Now, if you don't happen to have that person in your team, why does Southampton score a lot of goals from set pieces? Well, James Ward-Prowse it. You take Ward-Prowse out, they score a few less. It's to say, and the other thing you need, of course, is people who are very, very good at attacking the ball to score or defend them. And maybe you don't have those type of players in your team. Maybe your team is set up to play a different type of football. So you can't have it all ways. You could set up to be, we are going to say at the end of the season, we are fantastic at set plays. We hardly ever let them in, and we score perhaps more than our fair share. But then the football you play, from box to box during the 90 minutes, might not get you enough goals, and it might see you conceding goals another way. So set pieces are a relatively small part, a very, very important part. We used to think a third of a team's goals were scored that way. I'm not certain it's as high as that now, unless you start counting penalties. And if you start counting penalties, any comparison with the past goes out the window, because now we have a new offside rule, a new handball rule. So now, I would say that more than half of the penalties I see given for handball, A, I don't agree with, and B, they certainly wouldn't have been given 15, 20 years ago. So if you want to compare back, forget it. I would think the number of goals actually being scored from corner kicks has stayed relatively stable, and they are an important weapon. And if you've got that deliverer of the ball, and if you've got your Tony Adamses and your John Terrys of the world, who's Jackie Charlton, who get their head on it, you score a few.
Thank you.
I was really quick one. Rob, have you spoken to Rob, or do you intend to speak to him?
Who? Explain who? No. No, I quite frankly, I wouldn't recognise him if I saw him. I've never seen Rob Evans.
Do you intend to speak to him on the phone, or No. Well, he doesn't need to speak to me. His talking is going to be with Gino Pozzo and Cristiano Guerretta. They're the people he's going to be speaking to. If he wants to speak to me, I'd be more than happy to speak to him. But I'm not going to sort of, if you like, impose a conversation on him that he might not want to hear in the first place. But you can quite happily tell him that if he wants to speak to me and hear
anything that I'm thinking, I'll be more than happy to share with him. But it would have to be an initiative that comes from him. And as I say, unfortunately, I don't know. I know who he is and I know what he's done, but I haven't seen him or would be able to recognise him.
In the broadcast,